cut on, which was that narrow side. I've also done another side which got a bit more meat on it, just to show the two different. There's no real main difference. You'll just kind of start to cut a little bit differently. That's better. Okay. So we'll pop this guy in the vise like so. And if you're starting to work on like a surface that's angled, do yourself a favor. You don't have to work at an angle. You can put it horizontal, and then it's easier to work with, right? So the Japanese chisel. There's a Japanese chisel. We've got a bunch right over there. I've been sharpening up a few of them. It's really important for you while you're here to get a feel for a sharp tool, right? So if your chisel, my goal is to make sure that all the chisels are razor sharp, right? And I mean not literally. I've got a perpetual bald left arm from testing. If it's not razor sharp, it's dull. There are various levels of dull, but there's only one level of sharp, right? So get a feel for a sharp tool so that then when you go on and do chiseling, you know if something is sharp and it's working well or it's dull. Because sometimes you can't blame your tools. If you're responsible for sharpening your tools, you can't fully get away from the blame, but sometimes a dull tool just doesn't work well. So that being established, to make the cut here, what we're trying to do is establish this long, flat surface, right? The chisel, the most important feature of a chisel is this, the flat back, right? And if we want to create a flat joinery surface, we're trying to impart the flatness of this tool onto the material, right? What people tend to start to do as well when they work with the chisel like this is they think, I've got to, push this in like this, and then I'll move it over and push this in like that, and then I'll move it over and push this in like that, right? But in reality, the edge of your chisel here is this long, but you're only ever going to be cutting with like a fifth of it at a time. Maybe this corner or maybe this corner. The 95% of the rest of the tool is flat reference surface that you're going to use to hold your tool onto and then sweep that corner across and nibble away the material, right? If you come in and you step and step and step, you're going to end up with a surface that's here and there and here and there and there and there, right? So the other thing that we want to think about too is we've got grain rising and intersecting the geometry, the plane that we established with the cut, right? So I can come at this kind of from two directions. I'm coming at it horizontally like this, which is fine because the grain's all sitting that way. So whether there's only one way I can come at this and it doesn't really make a difference. But I can come at it this way, or I can also come at it this way, right? That way or that way. If I come at it this way, I'm going up into the grain and I'm going to be maybe tearing things out or making my life more difficult because it's taking more effort, right? So I can come at it from this direction, and in this direction, I'm going to be cutting with the grain, and it's like cutting the cat. It's much nicer, right? So be mindful of that. So the practically applying that, if I start at the bottom here, and I start to work my way up, I'm cutting into that grain like that. Whereas if I start from the top here, and start working my way down, I'm cutting along the length of those fibers, right? I can see kind of right away the difference. That here I'm cutting and it's more challenging. The grain is kind of constantly wants to dive back down below the surface, whereas on this side, I'm just slicing the wood fiber. It's never kind of digging down and going below, right? So now, we're just kind of doing a couple little slices here to demonstrate that, but now that we actually want to start establishing a joinery surface, if we have a nice chunk of material that we want to get rid of, we're obviously not going to start at zero and try and chunk all that material away. We're going to start up here at the top corner, and I'm going to take the corner of the chisel here like this, and I'm going to drive it through into the material horizontally like that, trying to maintain parallel with this joinery surface, right? So if I'm tipping up like this, if I'm way too low, I'm going to cut up at an angle like that. If I'm too deep like that, I'm going to cut down at an angle like that. right? So the level of my chisel here is going to dictate how horizontal that is. Not obvious, but just making a point. Now, you can give yourself a bit of a helping hand when you're starting out. Place the chisel on the workbench, assuming that your piece is level with the workbench and that trying to maintain that kind of position, right? Because right now I'm holding my chisel level. I should be able to drop it back down on the workbench just like that. So the goal is to maintain that horizontal plane, yeah? It's really easy for people to tend to want to dig in and kind of reach and find the surface. Illegal, you're not allowed to do that. Level, find level, stay level, and establish that surface, that plane, right? So I'm coming across, I've created that surface there, and you can see I've only worked with just that corner of the chisel. And now I've created the first part of my flat surface there, right? Now the goal is going to be I can hold my chisel on that as well. I can press this here, I can just kind of carefully, I can press my chisel right there and hold it on that surface, right? Now the goal is to extend that surface. So I'm not going to come in and try and line it up again and try and make another cut. I'm going to come back and I'm going to hold part of my chisel. I'm going to keep, right? I'm trying to keep that same level, right? So I'm pulling back nice and even. So there's kind of just an awareness there of the arm and the biomechanics. I'm coming across and I'm taking the corner of the tool and just poking it across the material. I'm keeping as much of the tool referenced onto the surface I just cut, and then I'm coming around and I'm going to sweep the corner of the chisel across and peel and lift up some of that material there, right? So I haven't cut really anything. I did a little bit there, but otherwise I haven't really cut anything from that first patch that I made. I've extended it over, and now the surface between these two is perfectly flush. There's no step because the tool was always resting on that original surface, and I'm just cutting anything that's protruding beyond that surface I created. Sound all right in terms of concept? So now I've extended that surface. So I finished my cut there. I'm going to do the same thing. Come back, bring the corner across, and trim like that. Come back, corner across, and trim. And you can see my angle changed a little bit there actually, right? You see that little step there? So that's me tweaking the angle one way or another. So I can come back, I can reset, I can pull back like that, and trim that flush back with the original surface there. And then I can come in, and now I can just march that all the way across, like so. If I'm finding I'm rising, maybe the surface that I created originally was a little bit tilted this way, now I'm coming out of the cut, I can adjust that. I can come in here and I can turn the chisel slightly, right? This is obviously exaggerated, but I can come in, and when I bring this over, I can tip the chisel, the bottom corner of the chisel down, and that allows me to tune the surface, so I can start to take a small cut like that, and now it's going to become a bigger cut, and a bigger cut, and a bigger cut, but notably I'm never cutting material from the surface that I just came off of, right? So that little bit of tweak starts to adjust the angle of the surface that you kind of project across, right? You can obviously take a bigger cut. The bigger cut you take, the more effort you have to put into the material, into the tool. So if you're finding yourself having to push and you're going to kill the baby bird that is your chisel, just take a smaller bite, right? It might seem counterintuitive, but taking many little bites quickly, smoothly, and efficiently is a much faster way of chewing through loads of material than trying to take these big bites that you're having to put force into and everything's going out of whack. Force equals less control, right? The more force you put in, the less control you have. So then the less ability you have to maintain a little level surface. Whereas these little swipes, you can start to do very nice, easy to control cuts like that. Now this is a really nice demonstration piece. I'm really lucky. It's nice and smooth. It's just cutting away. If your piece is higher density, like this guy, that's what I made, this will probably be a little bit denser. This will probably be a little bit harder, so you might not be able to take as big of bites as I was doing here, but the same concept applies. So I'm going to keep working down until, and I'm going to kind of keep splitting this in half until I get down to like about 1 millimeter or like a 1/2 millimeter to my line, right? And then I'm going to come in and set my chisel right in my knife line, and this is when the knife line is like really comes into its own. Because here, there's no guessing. I can put my chisel in this point, like blindfolded. I can just kind of come in. I'm not even really looking at it. There it is. That's it. That's 0, right? So you're not looking at a line. You're not trying to get it established. It's just locked in place. So I'm coming in straight in the knife line like that. And then as I come across, I'm going to watch this line here, right? Because if I'm leaning too far up, again, I'm going to cut away from that line. If I'm leaning too far down, I'm going to cut into that line. So if I've got my level correct, as I come across, I'll be able to cut nice and cleanly along this line. If I see that it's not quite right, I can adjust this up and down a little bit, like that, and then come across, level this out across to there. Don't worry about getting all the way to the end, that's fine, we'll do that later. And now I can come in and do the same. When I come back to do this cut, I'm making sure that that corner of my chisel is engaged in the knife line, and then I'm coming across just like that, all the way across like that. And I'm taking pretty big bites with the chisel right now. This is a very soft piece of wood. It's being very friendly to me. You might not be able to take these big chunks. I've got a couple of steps here as well because I kind of stopped paying attention, right? One little there, one little there. I can come back and just clean these up. Just like that, right? And this is why the saw is the coarse tool. You're not going to take 10th of a millimeter swipes with your saw, but you very easily can with the chisel. So that's the concept of kind of how we're establishing this plane here. As far as like the chisel and the manipulation, we've got again the same two, just like the saw, we've got two concepts, right? We've got a power hand and we've got a control hand. So if I'm right-handed, that'll be my right hand here, and one of the things I like about Japanese chisels, the form factor, is that they tend to fit my hand pretty well. They're not necessarily as long. I like to anchor the ferrule of the chisel into the heel of my hand so I can have good control with the power, because this hand does the macro movements, and like, you know, the macro turning this way and the macro kind of angles that way, and then the power pushing in, right? And with the power pushing in, I can really anchor that nicely and have good control. The left hand, my non-dominant hand, this one is the one that does like the micro adjustments. So here I can play with the pressure. I can put pressure right at the tip of the chisel to almost like hold it on the surface to give this hand less work to do. This hand can also, with my thumb, I can push, so I'm not really controlling anything with my right hand, right? Right now, just with my thumb, I can kind of push and scooch the blade of the chisel to take these little swipes, right? So that's just kind of that motion there. With this hand, I can also adjust the pressure. So I can put pressure more on this side of the chisel if I want to emphasize a cut with that corner of the blade, or I can put pressure on this side of the chisel if I want to lean it and put pressure and cut that corner of the blade, right? And start to really tweak the level left and right. And that's nothing to do with this hand, right? These little micro adjustments, this hand is far too removed from where the action to be able to contribute that fine little level of control, right? So that's pretty much it. Have a try at that. This side is pretty much everything when we're doing this surface here. The same rules apply in terms of the chiseling, except the fiber is sitting differently. So here we were kind of cutting the fiber, here we're kind of just separating the fiber. And you'll notice that right away as you come across, right? It sounds different, it feels different, and you'll see you can just start to lift parts of this and just peel that up and work that this way. As you saw me come in from the end and work in this way, this particular piece, I probably actually should have gone in the other direction. You see the grain relative to that line, the grain is rising up that way, right? So I probably should have actually come from this direction and gone out there. So same thing, if the grain is kind of sitting like that, I don't want to be cutting into it, I want to be cutting along it. So instead of starting from the end there, I would have been better off starting from the inside and working my way out. A bit awkward now, but come in like that, get rid of that piece. Yeah, there we go. And then, right? That might not be right. Sometimes, and this is actually a really good example. Sometimes you can take all the time you want to like read the grain and think that you know which way it's going, and actually when you start cutting into it, it has plans of its own. So that to me indicates to me that it's going this way and I should be cutting there. But as I start to peel this piece, it's diving below my line. So that to me right away says everything I just said was wrong. I'm going to come back at it from the other direction. And sometimes there's nothing is right and it's there's some twist in there and you just have to be careful and curse and take it out. Right? So that's that. So do that. Nice and simple. Kind of chisel there to 0, chisel there to 0. If you can't see your line, if you've sawn past your line for whatever reason or something like that, resist the urge to chisel it smooth. Okay? Very common. We've sawn and maybe we've sawn a little bit to the line or a little bit beyond the line, and you've chiseled everything here to the knife line and it all looks great, and there's a spot in the middle that's still rough from the saw and you just want to chisel. If you're cutting material that's below your layout line, you're failing to go to the joinery, right? So correct geometrical position is more important than smooth chiseling, right? So just keep that in the back of your mind. But I think nobody really has gone over their line, so I don't think it's really going to be much of an issue for you, but just in general. So chiseling that. This will eventually come out, get really thin and come to 0 as you're coming out to there, because this triangle here, down to there and up to here gets removed. When you get to the tips and the corners, we might not get there tonight, probably not. I'll show you guys that next week, but we just want to be mindful of not chiseling off an edge so that we don't fracture the material away. But I'll show that to you guys next week. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Yeah.